I'm Betty Swan, and welcome to our show, Wisdom in the Night, where you get help for those tough decisions in your life. Tonight I have a great guest. She is a nurse unit manager. Her name is Candy Aligan. Candy, I am so glad you're on this show. You're young, you're beautiful. I can't wait to hear all about you. Tell me where you're from. Tell me about your background.
Thank you for having me, Betty. Actually, I came from the Philippines, and I came to America when I was 5 years old. My childhood isn't really what you would call ideal. It wasn't a fun childhood. It was actually very dark. I was a victim of physical abuse, emotional abuse, and even psychological turmoil. And the person that did that to me, and I couldn't accept that fact, because the person who did that to me was actually the person that I thought would protect me, and that's my dad.
Oh, my.
So,
did he have anger issues? What was it?
I guess he just wasn't happy with, with what's going on in his life, and especially my mom and him, they would always fight, and they would always, they're countries away from each other. My mom would be here in America, and he would be in the Philippines, and at that time we were with him, and I guess he just couldn't accept the fact that that his life wasn't going the way that he wanted, and so he would displace his anger on me and my sister.
And how old were you?
It started about 10 years old. Mm. He started with the yelling, and and it gradually got worse and worse until he would punch me, and he would kick me, or he would drag me across the floor, and it felt like I was so hopeless. I felt like I was a prisoner of my own home, and I had no voice. I had no say in what was happening to me, and it came to a point where I'm so scared. He would scare us, and he would, especially that I'm the oldest, and he would scare me and say, if you say anything to your mom, and he would use my little sister, I would do something to her too. Because at that time it was just me that he was hurting, and so I was so scared for my sister, and I wanted to protect her. So I would stay quiet. I wouldn't even tell our aunts and our uncles that live around us.
And you what, about 10 years old?
This is about 10 years old. My sister was 2, because I'm 8 years older than my sister.
Unbelievable. A little child, and it goes on in a lot of homes. Mm-hmm. Candy, what do you think about, and you're a nurse, what do you think about all of these children that they're just sweet little kids? I mean, you're not bad when you're a little kid. Mm-hmm. And yet these bad things happen to them, awful things. They're defenseless, like you said. As a nurse, what do you say about that in terms of helping the child? What do you do?
First of all, it's really about taking the child away from what the person that's hurting them, or taking them away from that environment, and just loving them and caring for them and nurturing them. And it's hard, because even with me, it took a whole lot of healing, surrendering to God, and just really crying out and forgiving, despite of the other person not saying sorry at all for the mess he created in my life, and for the pain and the agony and the anger that I felt towards him. And it's hard to say, I forgive you, even without him asking sorry for the things.
That's a big deal. Now, I want you to talk about that, because forgiveness keeps you in, unforgiveness keeps you in prison. Mm-hmm. Forgiveness releases you from the prison, but it doesn't necessarily let the other person off the hook, does it?
No, it doesn't.
So explain that.
I guess with my journey in forgiveness, it's really God showing me that it's not about, because it's when we're done, when someone does wrong to us, we feel like, I need justice for that. You just want a sense of justice, that something was done wrong to you, and you feel like, you just want to get even. But at the end of the day, it was God who's telling me, you are not the judge of things. I am the judge. I am the ultimate judge, and I am just. All you need to do is surrender And it's really hard. The surrendering part is hard.
Very hard.
Yeah.
But the justness of God, what
Yes.
did he mean, I am just?
That he's fair. That just because my dad didn't say sorry to me doesn't
Ever? Did he ever?
Never. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that God is going to dismiss that, or God is going to just let that go. Whatever wrong, for me, it was more of God revealing to me, whatever wrong that your dad has done to you, he has to answer to me. And that has nothing to do with you anymore. Mm-hmm. What I want you to do is focus in on your relationship with me. And
with God?
With God.
Now, was that hard for you to get a relationship with God because you had your earthly parent not living up to anything like what God is?
It was very, very hard to accept God as a father.
And to call him Father,
yes,
right?
Yes.
I had trouble doing that.
It was hard because it's like, God, where were you when all of this was happening to me? Where were you when I was sleeping with a gun to my head at night? Where were you when I had so many questions? And this is a time where I already knew God and I accepted God, because that same year, before my dad did, all that horrible things towards me, that was actually the time where I accepted Christ. And so for me, it was just really questioning God. And I said, I accepted you. What's happening in my situation does not reflect you, does not reflect of a God that cares, and especially a God that calls himself Father. And so I actually ran away from God, and I didn't want to believe in him anymore. And I ran away from him. So that was 10 years old until I was 25.
15 years.
15 years I ran away from God, and I didn't want to believe in him. And it was more of my unanswered questions and my anger towards
But those
God.
would be normal questions anybody would ask.
Yes, very normal questions.
So when you came back, how'd you come back?
My cousin actually was going to church, and it was a time in my life also where I didn't know what to do. I was in college, I was in nursing school, and I was so lost. All of the pain, all of the resentment towards my mom, the resentment towards my father, I just felt lost in all of that. And I didn't know, I didn't know how to share that. I don't know how to be vulnerable with other people. And I didn't realize that I had no relationships. I had no relationship with my sister, although we lived in the same house. I had no relationship with my cousins because I ran away from Chicago. I mean, that was a time where I just ran away from everything else and moved to the Philippines because I had so much hatred. And
Now, was your father in the Philippines?
He was, because at that time, I guess that was when I was 21, 22. I was already here in Chicago, and I was living with my mom, but it felt like everything was just crumbling apart. It was just crumbling and it was falling apart. And I didn't know what I was going to do in college. I didn't know what I was going to be or who I was going to be. And so I told my mom, I don't want to, be part of anyone's life for now. And I just want to really run away. I really want to, separate myself from all of these things that's happening in our family and live by myself for a while. And so she allowed me, knowing that I was lost.
And knowing that you were going to go back to the same place where your father was?
Yes.
Were you not afraid?
It was actually not the same place, because my dad was living in the province, and I was going back to Manila, the capital of the Philippines, and we were an hour away by plane.
Oh.
So it was, and he didn't know where I lived. So
and
that
you
was...
didn't contact him, I'm sure.
No, I didn't.
And did you live by yourself?
I lived by myself.
And you didn't have friends.
I had
and
no
you had
friends.
Unhappiness and pain.
Yeah.
Well, how did you... There's people watching this show right now that can totally identify with everything you're saying. And how did you get from that situation, which many people are in, and they do not have the answer? They do not think God is the answer. They think God disappointed them. God let them down. How in the world did you move from that to where you were back with the Lord? What was that?
So my turning point was when my cousin kept inviting me to church Sunday after Sunday. This is for 2 years. She did not stop. She did not stop in pestering me going to church. And, she's like, I know a God who loves. I know a God. And every time I hear that, I would just shut down.
What else would she say to you?
She would always say, I know a God who's just and who's fair, and I know a God who listens. And those are things that I can't
Did you ever
come
say
to
back
terms
to her,
with.
I don't know that God.
Yes,
That God wasn't
yes.
there for me.
I always told her, she said, I remember her saying, Manang. Manang is, a way of saying older sister. And she said, Manang, you know what? There is a kind of love that is unending, a kind of love that is unrelentless, unwavering. And I said, where do you find that? Jesus camp? And then Jesus camp. And so, and then I just couldn't come in terms with that. Can't come to terms with that kind of God. And so she just kept inviting me. And then all of a sudden, I ran out of excuses.
That's my story.
I ran out of excuses, just went with her. And then I remember the pastor telling me, telling everyone, and he said, because the title of the series actually was When God Doesn't Make Sense.
Oh, that was perfect for
That was
you.
a perfect timing for me. And he said, there are people who run away from God because when they ask questions, they don't get an answer right away. And they don't wait for the response, and they just simply run away from God. And there are people who believe in God and ask questions, and it takes time for God to answer them, but they wait. And he was telling the story about Habakkuk, how Habakkuk said, I will stand on the rampart and wait on the Lord. And that clicked. And I said,
It did with you. Were you sitting there when he was saying?
I was sitting there and I said, that clicked. That makes sense. Because I did not wait for God to answer me. I kept asking and asking and asking. But I did not wait for God to answer my questions. I just simply said, you don't make sense to me, so I'm leaving. I bailed out on God. And that was a time where I said, I need to be discipled. I need to be part of a community that believes in God, and I need to be mentored. And I want to go back and try this relationship with God wherever it takes me.
That's a big step. That's a big jump. That's a big change. Did you see a change in yourself? Did you act differently, or was it all still questioning? What?
It was weird because I didn't know at that time. I already had the gift of discernment and I had the gift of knowledge, and I would really hear God. So there are questions.
Even before you made the sleep?
Even before the sleep.
Wow.
And I would, during the end of the preaching, I would always ask God, so how does this happen? And he said, come to the next preaching and I will answer you. And he would answer me Sunday in and Sunday out. And I just didn't even notice I was going to church for a whole year already. And I was advancing in growth and in just my foundations with God, just by, asking questions and waiting for his reply.
And so that was the big deal for you. That was the big turning point for you, is to realize when you ask the questions and you're very sincere and you're hurting and you don't get the fast answer or even the sort of fast answer, you still keep waiting, right?
You still keep waiting.
All right, well, why would God do that? Why would he wait?
There are times where I ask that, God, why did you make me wait for an answer for all of these things? And looking back 5 years, later, because God just revealed to me, because you know why? If I tell you now, you will never be ready. I mean, if I tell you back then, if that, whatever happened to you, you won't be ready for my answer. And you won't accept my answer.
I believe that, and I want to tell you why. I had a lot of hard things happen to me growing up, a lot. Very difficult. And one time I said to the Lord, why did I have to go through all of that? None of my friends did. Why did I have to? And you know how you can open the Bible and you look down and you see a verse just right there and you know it's God talking to you because of how it feels. It's like grabs you.
Yeah.
I looked down and it said, it's good for a man to bear the yoke in his youth. And I knew God was saying that to me. And, you know, life does have hard things. You cannot go through life without having hard things. You're just not going to make it. And for God to say it was good for a man to bear the yoke in his youth, it hit me exactly the same way what you heard hit you. Because I thought, I am different because of all of this pain. I am compassionate. I am not haughty. I'm not prideful. I care so much about people in their pain because I know what it feels like. And I believe that God molded me through that situation. He didn't cause that pain. I know He didn't. That's not a God thing. But it did happen to me. And out of it, I was molded for where God needed to use me in the future. Would you say that about your life?
I would totally say yes to that. Looking back, because right now I'm actually mentoring, young women, and I'm leading other people to Christ, and people that are going through the same things that I am, or sometimes not even. But I wouldn't be the person that I am today if God did not mold me back then. My situation and my circumstances from the past taught me how to be more compassionate, like you said, how to be more graceful, how to express love, how to receive love even. It totally made me understand where other people are coming from. It's so hard to preach to someone if you haven't experienced it yourself.
Right. You can't say, well, I know how you feel when you don't know how they feel.
Yeah, that's definitely.
Right. Well, what do you think is God's destiny for your life?
Going back into, what happened to me in the past and how God molded my heart, now I realize that God has made me go through, or not even allowed me to go through, all of the hardships, all of the different circumstances in my life, so that He can send me to the nations.
And so, why do you say it that way? Do you find, is it because you have a drawing to go to other nations? Because you think they have the same kind of problems and you want to be there to help them? Is that it?
Yes. So actually the only reason why I'm in New York City is because God told me to go.
To New York?
To New York.
From Manila?
From Manila.
Oh.
So it's funny because I always tell people, I ran away from home, meaning Chicago. I ran away from my home in Chicago to find my real home. Because I discovered God in the Philippines. I learned who He was. I learned about His love, His great love, His undying love, and His salvation there. And when God told me to go to New York, I said, no, God, I am not going. I am not going there. And He said, I remember the verse, and He said, go down to Egypt, for I am with you, and I will turn you into a great nation there, and surely I will bring you back again. And so with that, I said, God, you promised, this is your word, I will follow, no matter how hard it is for me to let go of the Philippines. Because at that time, I really saw the Philippines as my promised land. It was where I was so comfortable. Everything just happened, and I was thriving, I was leading, I was part of a great church. And going back, and it really made sense to me because I said, God, they have a different God than I do. If I go down to New York, I know that it's going to be my Egypt, and it's going to be dry there. I don't even have a church there. I don't even have friends there. And mind you, godly friends. And I'm going to go back to my past life, and I didn't want to do that. He said, just go. So I'm here because God told me to go, and it has been such a great journey so far.
Yes, and so you think your destiny then is to mentor young women, to help them get understanding for how to get through this pain, how to reconnect with God. Mm-hmm. And do you see that you're getting to do a lot of that?
Yes, and not only that, Betty, but when it comes to discipleship, helping others follow Jesus, no matter where they come from, what walk of life they come from. It's really about helping people follow Jesus. And that's why I'm here, to help others follow Jesus. Not that I'm not doing that in the Philippines. The only difference is God told me there are already enough people in the Philippines to do that. I want you in a different place.
And you're needed here where there's not as many.
Yes. Yes.
But now, how does that tie in with your being a nurse? And where do you actually work?
I work at a long-term care facility. It's a nursing home, and this is where people who their families can't take care of them anymore, and they need more medical attention, more help, and so that's why they're there in our facility. And it ties into that because God, I know that I'm called and I'm destined to go out into the nations. And at first I felt like it was just accidental that I became a nurse. But then knowing that now I can go into restricted areas and
just be a nurse.
And just be a nurse.
I've heard about people that have said, I can go into restricted areas that do not want Christianity, they do not want Christian workers, but I can go in with my occupation, and then the places that God needs me there, they open up. Has that happened to you?
Yes, it has. It has happened to me. It may not be a restricted nation where they don't believe in Christ, but it's definitely a community that doesn't believe in Christ. And to be able to go inside that community and work as a nurse and at the same time share the love of God for them. I remember praying once for my patient who was just in terrible pain, who was already, I believe, stage 4 cancer, and just was in tremendous pain despite of the pain medication. And I just prayed for that person, and I quietly, even, it wasn't even like, let me pray for you. It was never like that. It was just like, God, take this person's pain away. And just like that, the person, I was like, all of a sudden, I feel no pain at all. And
that's healing. People don't realize Jesus heals today.
Yes.
And he can heal people. Sometimes they're completely well. And sometimes, like this person that you're talking about, just in the moment of intense pain, it's gone.
Yes.
What did the person say?
He didn't say anything because also at that time I was so scared to share my faith as well. But I just said, you know what? I prayed for you.
You said that too?
Yes, I said, I prayed for you. And it was like a leap of faith for me to say, and, just be courageous and bold and say, I prayed for you. And he said, thank you for the prayer. I'm not a Christian, but thank you for the prayer. It worked.
And he'll never forget it.
Yes.
That's the thing we don't realize. We're so eager to share with people, but we don't know how they're going to receive it, and it makes you a little bit scared. And then think about what he said. I'm not a Christian, but I believe in that prayer, and I thank you.
Yeah.
Well, what kind of wisdom would you give the people you're mentoring that are wanting to do what you do? What do you say to them?
Surrender.
What does that mean?
I always tell everyone that I'm leading, surrender or commit your ways to the Lord, and he will direct your path.
So are you saying if somebody wants God to direct their path, they don't want to do it themselves anymore, they want to go God's way, the only way that's going to happen is complete surrender?
Yes.
That's hard too.
It's very, very hard. It is scary.
Well, how'd you get past that?
I remember someone telling me, like one of my leaders at church told me, she said, surrender and God will open doors for you. And at that time, I was a plan freak. I would plan out things. I would make goals for myself. And if I don't meet those expectations for myself, I feel like, oh my God, it's the end of the world. But surrendering is totally different from that. It's saying, God, here, this is how I feel. These are my dreams. These are my aspirations. And I just want to surrender that. I'm giving you control over that. And to sit in the background and say, God, what's happening?
Candy, I know that too, because I've experienced it. I want to tell you a little saying that someone said to me one time. If you do it for yourself, you'll have some success. But if you allow him to do it, he will place you in realms you never dreamed of. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that.
Has that happened to you?
It has happened.
Can you give an example of it?
So coming back from the Philippines to live in New York City and to work here, I knew I was called. I was called to the nations. Actually, even before coming here, I was going to enroll in School of World Ministry. I wanted to be a full-time missionary. into let's say Tibet or into somewhere else, and I was willing to commit that to the Lord, and God said, no, not at this time. I want you somewhere else. And coming to New York, I had no expectations. I had nothing. I just knew God was calling me here. And he opened doors for me. Now I'm working with Every Nation New York City with Pastor Bruce Ho and Pastor Ron Lewis. And I'm helping with the discipleship team there, helping people follow Christ and helping them become world changers, so to speak.
So you kind of have an administrative gift too, right?
Yes.
That
Yes.
that you can see what is needed and how to set it in place.
I'm meeting all these different people, learning about ministry, learning about how to share the gospel into a community where they don't believe in God. And that's just because God opened doors for me. And even at work, Betty, at work, I'm a unit manager and I'm the youngest person there. And I had no training. I don't even know what I was doing. I don't know, because when I applied for the company, I applied for a regular staff nurse, someone who would give out medication, who would do wound treatments, and that's it. And when my boss told me, I don't want that, I already have enough of that, I need you to be my unit manager. And I'm like, I have no training. I'm a fairly new at managing. And she's like, don't worry about it, I'll train you.
Okay, so right there, leadership again.
Yes.
So I want to talk to you about something. Have you really been listening to what Candy has said? Have you noticed she's just a normal person? She's not somebody that comes in like gangbusters. She's been reluctant. She's been a little bit fearful, but what else has she been? She's been courageous. She has said, God, I want you, and so I'm going to surrender everything I want to you. But you notice she's not saying it turned out bad when I did that. She's saying it turned out better than ever. I want to thank you so much for tuning into this show. It wasn't an accident that you turned on the TV tonight. I hope you got some wisdom and that you have a great rest of the night and you use the wisdom. Now, whether you're going to sleep or going to work, God bless you. I'll see you next time. Bye.